Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. It depends wherever you are. So we are going to start this presentation. My name is Christian. I'm project manager for Voice UI. So if you can maintain your camera off, it would be great. Also your microphone. So this is going to be pre-recorded, so we can share then with our networks and also like Facebook pages and YouTube. So we are going to start now. So welcome everybody. This is Country Spotlight Guyana. We are going to speak about how Voice UI is supporting refugees in the Caribbean, specifically in Guyana. So we are going to speak today about a little bit about Guyana and also why migrants and refugees go to Guyana. So we are going to show you some details regarding that. Also, we are going to show you some very basic data and also a profile of refugees and migrants that actually or currently are in Guyana. Also, sometimes of support they are looking for and what type of support we are providing to them, and also like some challenges and conclusions. If you have questions, please you can write these questions on the chat and I will reply to you. So for those who don't know about Guyana, Guyana is a country in South America and also is considered part of the Caribbean. The geography of Guyana is very complex because there are not many systems of transportation to reach to many places in Guyana. So for example, you see in this picture, it is Mabaruma in region one of the main entry point for many refugees and migrants coming from Venezuela. So the geography is very, as I said, it's very complex. You have places with rivers, like a lot of the Amazon is considered to be like also in most of Guyana, about 80% or 70% of Guyana is also habitated. So it's very complex. There are not many urban areas, with the exception of the coastline. Also, Guyana is an English-speaking country, so most of refugees need to be able to speak English as a first language, but also you can find other languages, for example, Creole, that is a local language, and also some Amerindian languages. In some other cities, for example, Lefem, they speak some foreign languages like Portuguese in some shops, for example, or communities, because the proximity to these countries, such as Brazil, for example. Or in others, like for example, when you go to the east part of the country, you may find also like other residents that speak, for example, Dutch, because also the proximity to with Suriname. There are a lot of lack of services. For example, when refugees go to, I can tell you about this picture. For example, in Mabaruma, there are not many services. So some of them, they need to go to other urban areas to find, like for example, health or education. Not in this case in Mabaruma, but in more remote areas. Also, the culture is very particular. You have a lot of different kind of ethnicity backgrounds also, like for example, you can find like the Indo-Guyanese culture and also the Afro-Guyanese culture and the Guyanese itself. So you can find different kind of cultural backgrounds of different communities, even like Amerindian communities. So it's a bit different if you are like, for example, in urban areas than rural areas. Also, governance and democracy sometimes is challenging because you have a lot of different political situations in the country, especially now. But there are many institutions and young people working to have a more democratic Guyanese country. So there are many challenges in Guyana, but we are going to speak about specific challenges that refugees need to face when they go to Guyana in a bit. So I want to tell you why migrants and refugees go to Guyana. So in most of the cases, you are going to find Venezuelans and Cubans, refugees and migrants in Guyana. They go mainly because they escape from their countries because economic and political crisis in their home countries, as well as other situations. In particular with Venezuelans, they go because the two reasons, economic and political situations, especially Guyana received people coming from the west part, northwest part of Venezuela, like a region called Región Oriental, and it's very close to Guyana also. Also, you can find Cubans coming from Cuba because political reasons and also economic reasons. So these two nationalities are the most that you can find especially in Georgetown, but in other also rural and urban areas. You can find also other nationalities, for example, Dominican Republic, or even like other countries that are in other continents. So, but most of the cases you are going to find Venezuelans and Cubans. So we are going to focus on this presentation about Venezuelans. So there are approximately 33,000 Venezuelans that have migrated in the last few years to Guyana. So you can find in different areas. So you have here on the map one of the main entry points in the country. One is Letem that you can see in the south, and most of the people that enter from the south, not south, I would say like central south, is they go then to Georgetown, which is in the coastal area. I'm not sure if you can see my arrow, but is where the footsteps ends. Then we have Bank on the west, and in the north we have Region 1, which most of people cross to Guyana through a boat. And also you can find Charity that is in proximity to Georgetown. So you have 5 main entry points to Guyana, and many of them go through bus or through, for example, boats. But the conditions where in how they travel to Guyana are very difficult. So for example, if you live in the northwest part of Venezuela, so a trip between Venezuela to Guyana is about 4 hours in the open sea. So it's very dangerous for many of them to reach out to Guyana. Also, for example, to the main one of the main entry points in the south, that is Lethem. They need to travel many hours. They need to cross through Brazil, and then they enter into Guyana. So the economic impact for them is very high, because they need to obviously pay for these buses and also pay for hostels and different kind of accommodation and transportation to stay in different places in the south of Venezuela, and then crossing to Brazil, and then going to Guyana. And transportation between from Lethem to Georgetown is very expensive, so they also need to incur in such expenses to reach out to the main to the capital of Guyana, which is Georgetown. So many of them stay in urban areas, and then there is a lot of discussion if they are going to stay in the country or if they are going to another places. For example, many of them or some of them go to Suriname or French Guyana, but also some of them continue to the south in places such as Manaus, Boa Vista, Bonfim, or other urban areas in Brazil. But also there are many Cubans and Venezuelans that continue to other countries such as Argentina, Chile, or like Uruguay. So there are, or Peru. So there are different different locations that they continue traveling to. So in the case of Guyana right now, there is approximately amount of 33,000 Venezuelans living in Guyana. So I want to speak to you a little bit about the profile of different Venezuelan migrants and refugees in Guyana. So we have identified three different groups. One is criollos, which are like Venezuelans living in urban areas in Venezuela that have migrated to Guyana. So for example, if they come, most of them, they speak Spanish, and some of them speak English. But these are like the most common profile of Venezuelans that you are going to find in Guyana. The second group are the Waraos, which is a group of indigenous communities. Warao is an indigenous community that you can find not just in Venezuela, but in other places like Guyana and Suriname. So most of them, they come from the northwest region of Venezuela. So they go to region 1 that is in the north of Guyana. And most of them, they speak only Warao, but some of them also speak Spanish, but only a few of them speak English, very basic English, and they mostly live in rural areas. And then we can find other group that are not Venezuelans as such, but they are Guyanese that went to Venezuela. They lived there for about 20 or almost like 40 years in some cases. They have migrated to Venezuela when Venezuela was in a better economical situation for different reasons. And they are returning now to Guyana. So we call them returnees or Guyanese returnees. So they speak also Spanish and English in most of the cases, and they have different status in Guyana because most of them, they still have Guyanese citizenship, so they can access, for example, to more opportunities or like benefits in the country. So it's a bit different from criollos and Waraos. I must say also that the Waraos are in some cases not just identified with only one country, but with both countries, because they live in the border between Venezuela and Guyana. So in most of the cases, they have been for a very long time living in that area. So they use the area for different kind of cultivation activities, or like fishing, for example. So they have been traveling for decades, or like yeah, for a very long time between Guyana and Venezuela. But now, because the situation is more complex, they need to stay more, for example, in Venezuela or in Guyana. So because some of the situations in the northwest part of Venezuela is unsafe for them, then sometimes they take the decision to go to Guyana. However, it could be like different reasons why Guaraos and Criollos and returnees are going to Guyana, as I explained before. But what kind of support are refugees and migrants they are looking for? So, for example, we have identified 5 different or main areas. One is education, but with a special focus on English as a second language classes, because Guyana is an English-speaking country, so most of them cannot speak English, or at least cannot, cannot speak English appropriately or fluently. So this is one of the main areas of support they are looking for. Then we have health. So for example, in region 1, which you are going to find a lot of Guaraos, their health system in the northwest part of Venezuela is they have a lot of lacks of services there, so they travel to Guyana in some situation also looking for health services too, and then they return to Venezuela. These are some particular cases, but also, for example, if you are in urban areas, of course, like many people have different health conditions, so they are going to look for health services or like a different kind of support, including mental health in urban and rural areas. Then work is one of the main reasons, or one of the main support they are looking for. So many of them is for many of them it's very difficult to find a job in Guyana, especially in urban areas where the main economic activities are retail, construction, and other minor areas of work. So for example, in the main capital or in the main urban area, that is Georgetown, most of Venezuelans and Cubans, they work in the retail sector. But it's very difficult for them to find a job in Guyana because they need to speak English. So this is why they also try to look first for English support instead of work. Then the fourth kind of support we have identified that they are looking for is housing. But this is like a natural support that everyone is going to look for when they migrate to another place. However, I think I should put here not just housing, but also housing and community, because they are looking also like for community activities or like community integration. So for example, if you live in Georgetown, that is the capital, so you may find a lot of situations where Venezuelans are very lonely or they don't have networks. So they are trying to look for housing and community support. And especially now with the COVID situation, there are many Venezuelans that are at risk of becoming homeless because they have lost their jobs or they have lost some economic activity and income. So obviously they are renting in urban areas, which is more difficult for them than the other ones that are in rural areas, which are locations where you can find cheaper rental places, and also you can still hold some economical activities, for example, agriculture. And the last kind of support that we have identified is legal. So for example, again, when you migrate or you are a refugee in a country, you try to legalize also your situation or regularize. So for example, you are going to try to get some visa extensions, or also in some situation, other kind of legal support. If you have, for example, some family problems, gender-based violence, or other kind of difficulties. So you are also going to request legal services. So all these services have been very challenging for all organizations, because the capacity for Guyana is not like appropriate to respond to the 33,000 or more of Venezuelan. And we are just speaking about Venezuelan, but we have a lot of other migrants nationalities, for example, like Cubans, as I said, that are over 20,000 at least in the country, and also like other minor communities, for example, Brazilians or other people coming from Suriname or other places from the Caribbean. So at Voices, we have been working in 4 of these different 5 areas. So we have been providing education support with ESL classes. Last year, we had presential classes, firstly funded by donations from people, Guyanese citizens to Voices GY, but also in the second semester, we receive also support from UNHCR. So we try to work with different partners. So we are supporting them also with mental health, with a mental health program, and this is fully funded by Voices UI through different donation, but also with volunteers. So we are starting supporting them in that area. But also some interesting area that we have been starting supporting them, especially Venezuelans, during this year is with work and legal. Why I say legal? Because we try to engage them to register different kind of businesses, and also to support them with their visa procedures for business or work permit. So we support with small businesses ideas, and also small businesses grant. So for that, we need to ensure that they have their work visas. Also, this program have been supported by IOM in Guyana, and we are almost in the last part of the project. So we are going to have the first cohort of entrepreneurs graduating in a few weeks. So the challenges that they need to overcome, refugees and migrants and asylum seekers, I must say, also in the country, there are lots of challenges. Yeah, for example, lack of services. There are a lot of lack of capacity. Oh, sorry, lack of services, for example, because there is no capacity for education, for example, or health, as I explained before, but also lack of connectivity. And we can speak about not just, for example, internet connection, but also transportation. There are lots of lack of connectivity in many areas, and also they suffer a lot of discrimination. Discrimination is a very important and interesting point, because many of them they think they have been discriminated, but we have identified in a needs assessment before that this discrimination comes also because they have no understanding of, for example, the other languages. So for example, Venezuelans feel discrimination sometimes because the local community speak other languages. So when they speak in front of Venezuelans, they think they are speaking about them, but again, they don't understand that what they are saying. So for example, there is a lot of miscommunication also that creates discrimination among communities of refugees and Venezuelans, and also among the local community. There is a lot of lack of opportunities. For example, in Guyana, the population is very low, so obviously you are going to have less development of different kind of economic sectors. For example, if you have a refugee or like migrant living in London, is very different than living in Georgetown, because the opportunities for jobs or education or health, for example, are very different. You have a lot of organization, for example, in other countries to help them, but in Guyana is a more difficult situation. Also, the language is different. So for example, Venezuelans going to Chile, Argentina, or Colombia, they speak the same language, but when they go to Guyana, they speak English. So it's also one of the main challenges for them. Also, as I explained when we started, there are different cultures. So for example, again, if they go to Colombia or Panama, the culture is more similar because it's a Latin culture. But when they go to Guyana, is a bit different because Guyana has a lot of different kind of culture, especially, for example, Indian culture. They are going to find like differences also with food. For example, it's more spicy, and different kind of aspects of culture, for example, music or even languages. Um, and also there is a lack of support. I think this is also because the capacity of different organizations and the government to respond, and also because there is a gap of data regarding migrants and refugees. So there is a lot of lack of support to refugees and migrants because different reasons that I have already said. So organizations need to firstly get financial and technical support, capacity building, because there are many small organizations in the country, but they don't have actually the capacity to respond to the Venezuelans coming to Guyana in an appropriate way. For example, in housing is one of the main areas where most of organizations are facing different challenges because of legislation, but also because of financial support to give to refugees and migrants. Also, data gathering is needed. So we don't have a lot of different kind of data sources to work with refugees and migrants. And at Boise, we are trying to get some basic data, but it's still difficult to get it. Also, it is important to work closely with communities. So organizations need to visit different communities and need to speak with their refugees and migrants coming from Venezuela to understand their needs, and also to develop more inclusive strategies. So civil society organizations and NGOs need to be part of different kind of discussions with the government, for example, and intergovernmental organizations to develop different strategies, for example, in education or like in the business sector or economic sector, to include these migrants and refugees in society. So at Voices, we support them with different kind of activities or programs. The most important for us is the English as a second language courses. So we have at the moment two levels, and we provide them with the skills, with the basic skills, and so they can integrate in a better way into the Guyanese society. We also provide cultural events and social integration events. For example, last year we had different activities such as Spanglish events, where they were able to communicate in English and Spanish with the local community, but also other cultural events that we develop with other partners, for example, different embassies or like cultural organizations in Georgetown. This year we have been doing these events online. And also we provide research support. For example, we try to research, as I said, in the areas of education, languages, and social integration. We are working also with some partners. For example, last year, we have developed a needs assessment for the Northwest region with UNHCR. We also provide livelihood programs such as the small business support. As I said before, like giving small business grants also for them. And also we have a mental health support developing now with 6 different objectives that I'm going to speak in a couple of more slides. And we are also doing partnership with different institutions, community organizations, different NGOs, and also government. So during COVID had been a bit difficult, so we turned more into online activities. We also have been supporting about 60 families with food and non-food items, but our main programs are online English classes where we are providing for more than 70 students English classes for free, and we have more than 9 volunteer staff. So 7 of them are teachers from different parts of the world. And also we are, with the support from IOM, we are developing a small business program where we have 12 different projects that have been selected from Venezuelans. And we are also trying to get more data and understanding in how Venezuelans can appropriately be develop these kind of projects. For example, we have from IT to bakeries. So they are going to receive finally in a couple of weeks more like a small grant so they can start their businesses. And this business program includes legal support for them and also includes a training, which is 8 weeks training for them also that during COVID had been developing online. We have also just started our mental health support. We have more than 20 psychologists that have been selected among more than 80 volunteers that have applied from different parts of the world. All of them are Spanish-speaking psychologists, so there is no language barrier between them with the refugees or migrants coming from Venezuela. And we have different kind of objectives. One of these are technical support and research. So we want to get data again about like different kind of the mental health background or like support that we can give to them. Also awareness of its benefits. So for example, we want to touch base in how the different kind of benefits of psychology have been received in different kind of migrants and refugees. Also, we want to share experiences of migrants, life experiences. So we are going to tell stories about some of them, trying to get a more human perspective for refugees and migrants. And we want to share it within the local community so they can know a bit more about the backgrounds of migrants and refugees in Guyana. And also we want to build new networks between organizations and different people also working with migrants and refugees and with programs, with mental health programs in the region. So what's next? This is something that you also, we can discuss, but we identify also 4 different kind of steps. So we need to hear refugees and migrants. We need to understand what their needs and challenges are. So we need to hear them, what they need to say. And we need to we need to question ourselves also if the help that we are providing is relevant. If not, if there is another way to support them, because many of organizations, they develop programs without, like, for example, consulting refugees and migrants, or so it's very important also, like, to consider their perspective. So for example, we cannot provide a support that we think is going to be useful if we don't speak with them. And also, if we have been doing that, so we need to ask them if that program also was useful for them, or if they feel satisfied, or something else that could be of your interest. We need to empower them. In many cases, migrants and refugees are not part of the big decisions, even like for strategies that have been developing in some countries. So we need to ask them about their opinions to take these big decisions. And also we can integrate them in our project. This year we have integrating also, like last year, different persons or migrants coming from Venezuela in different kind of voluntary activities, and these have been very positive for Voice GY, because we can share experiences also, and they can also support their own community. So it is different when migrants support their own communities and local communities support them. So I think it's something that all organizations working with migrants and refugees should consider. And also we need to collaborate more between governments, organizations, and people, like also migrants and refugees, and collaborate also with different kind of data information between organizations. So this is my presentation about Guyana and our work and understanding working with refugees and migrants. So if you have questions, please, you can unmute yourself, or you can write in the chat. Thank you.
Hello, Chris. This is Ted. I have a question.
Yes, Ted. Hello, how are you?
Okay. Yes, fine, thank you. You mentioned that Guyana has a relatively small population, and that the Venezuelan refugee population was about 33,000. What percent of the entire population do the Venezuelan refugees represent?
I don't have an estimate for Venezuelans, but for the total migrant population, which is mostly Cubans and Venezuelans, is around, it's very close to the 5% of the total population. So Guyana has 700,000, a bit more of, I think it's 750,000 approximately of, the population of Guyana. So is when you have like 33,000 people coming to a few cities, is a lot of people for them, because most of the cities, for example, Georgetown, like the central area of Georgetown, which is the capital, only has about 80,000 people living there. So, yeah.
So the highest concentration of both groups of refugees would probably be in Georgetown, the capital.
Sorry?
The highest population of both groups of refugees is probably in Georgetown, the capital?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, mostly, but also you have a lot of them living in other urban areas. For example, about there is a second city in the coastal area, which is called Charity, and also Parica. So you have a lot of them also living in these coast line cities. So, but most of them are in Georgetown.
Okay, I do have a couple more questions. So
Yeah.
the students that are learning English, they have to live where there's a relatively good internet connection. So does that mean that most of them are living in Georgetown?
They have also reliable internet connection, for example, in other urban areas, in other, for example, coastal cities. But yeah, most of them, for example, are from region 4 and region 3 that are very close to, well, the capital is in region 4, but also Bredenhof that is in region 3 that is just crossing the river from Georgetown. They have more kind of reliable internet connection. We are working also with a new partner. So we are considering giving them some top ups so they can, for example, in other areas, or even if they are in Georgetown, not all of them have internet connection because obviously they need to pay the plans or like the Wi-Fi for their houses or where they rent. But we are considering helping them with top ups so they can top up their cell phone and they can buy these bundles, internet bundles. So we can teach them. This is going to be in the next stages of ESL classes for this year.
Okay, thank you so much for answering my questions, Chris.
No problem. Thank you, Ted.
Okay,
I have some question from Lois. Hello, Lois. So Lois says, what proportion of Venezuelans are people of colors, for example, not Latino, Black, Indian, indigenous? What proportion of refugees are people of color? I asked because when I volunteered in Mabaruma, and I noticed that all of Venezuelans participating in the program were Latinos. Yeah, so for example, I wonder, yeah. So for example, in region 1, in Mabaruma, most of, well, you have like 50-50%. I'm not sure about like the exact data, but about, I would say like 50% of them are warehouse. So indigenous Venezuelans, migrants or refugees. So it's interesting that you only have like Latinos or like criollos, as I said, also in your program in region 1. I don't have like a specific proportion, but it would be interesting to have it. However, it's very difficult like to get this data right now in Guyana. But for example, in urban areas, most of them are Latinos. And in rural areas, most of them are indigenous, for example, or Afro descendant. I'm not sure if I replied to your question.
Yeah, I mean, you made the attempt that you were able to. I'm just searching actually online as we speak to see what the proportion is. I just found it interesting that in materials that I've read about Venezuela, the racial breakdown is, or that is to say that there are various races represented in the population, and so I wondered how, you know, whether other people other than Latinos are seeking refuge.
Yeah, so especially, for example, indigenous Venezuelans that are warehouse in the north region where you went in Mabaruma. So this is like the other group. So yeah, we up to now we only have like considering these 3 groups that are like the criollos or Latinos, the indigenous Guaraos, and also like the returnees that are not Venezuelans, are Guyanese, but yeah, we consider also as people of concern. So yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
No problem. So Paula asked, hello, Paula. Do you want to unmute yourself? And if not, I can read to you. I'm going to read. Thanks. Well, thank you, Paula. And she says, I would like to ask you which are the consequences of discriminations that affects refugees. for example, in the areas of jobs, education, or other areas. So for example, discrimination is a huge topic. I would not say just for refugees, but also like for the local community too. But one of the consequences, and when we research and visited some areas, rural areas, for example, people don't want to go to the school. For example, some children are facing a lot of challenges integrating into the school system. And also, for example, in urban areas like Georgetown or Charity or Parica, which are one of the three main urban locations for Venezuelan refugees, they have a lot of challenges. Well, first, because they don't feel like very integrated into their own communities, and also because they feel ashamed, if I can say in that way, or embarrassed speaking with the local community. So in most of the cases, they stay among their own communities of Venezuelans, and they don't want to talk to different kind of Guyanese locals. So this discrimination makes them be more kind of lonely in one way, or like or to be more dependent of their own Venezuelan networks. So for example, when they have different problems, for example, a legal problem, they don't ask Guyanese community for support. So, and it's very difficult for the Venezuelan community to support themselves because they don't have the resources. So it creates a situation where discrimination also is a bigger problem because they don't ask support, because they feel embarrassed with the communication between the local community and them. But there are, of course, other kind of consequences. For example, with mental health, it is very well studied that discrimination can impact in the long term for different kind of situations, even more in particular children, but also all type of people. So if they suffer discrimination, this is going to also affect, of course, like the mental health of these persons.
Wow, that's intense. So thank you for your response. What about children? What about their education? How they manage that?
About discrimination?
Yeah, in the sense that it's difficult to them, right, to get integrated in this community. So how do they deal with education?
Yeah, so for example, last year they have been receiving some support with extra English classes. So of course, if they can speak more with the local children or Guyanese children, they are going to suffer less discrimination. But they are also, the Ministry of Education is having a lot of different kind of initiatives supporting also teachers to be more open-minded for different situations with refugees and migrants in Guyana. But definitely for them it's still like very, very difficult. However, when we visited Mabaruma, that is one of the rural areas, but also main entry point in Guyana, so they have a lot of demand for education of Venezuelans in that region. So we identified that children, for example, they integrate faster into the Guyanese society than their parents, because they can learn faster the English language. So, and they also play, or like they attend school, but for example, for parents, they stay at home and they don't speak with neighbors, or like they don't have friends, like local friends. So and children, this is a bit different. I think I'm not saying that it's not difficult for them, but it's also like easier for them to overcome these situations.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
No problem. I'm not sure if someone else has another question. If not, you can always write to us on voiceeduy@gmail.com, and you can visit also our Facebook and Instagram webpage. We are going to post this recording, I think, in our social media, so you can watch it again. Thank you very much for attending this presentation. Have a good day.